I want to welcome you here today to the CSE Colloquium. It's a great pleasure to welcome Peter Lee. Peter's a friend of mine for 20 plus years and a friend of many of ours here. He's got a long career. He was a grad student at the University of Michigan, faculty at Carnegie Mellon for many years, and just this past summer took a leave of absence from being head of the computer science department at Carnegie Mellon to start a new office at DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. So he and Drew Dean from his office have spent the whole day talking to people here. They've got another couple hours after this talk, and Peter's going to describe to us today his experience in the first quarter at DARPA. So Peter, thanks for being here.
So thanks, Ed. It's really been a fun day. I'm really thrilled to be here. I feel like some really exciting things are happening at DARPA, and always anxious to tell people about it. This is also kind of a difficult talk to give. I've been at DARPA for less than 5 months, and the new office that I've been asked to create has been in existence for only about 4 months, and so it's still a work in progress. Keep that in mind as we go through. Now, to start, I call this just Peter at DARPA because I felt like I was coming to talk to friends, and that many of you know me. But of course, DARPA is something that might not be familiar to some of you. I suspect it's familiar to most of you, but just in one slide, DARPA was formed in the wake of the launch of Sputnik, which was, of course, this cathartic technological surprise for the US. And DARPA's founding charter was to prevent and, when opportunity presents itself, to create technological surprise. Since then, DARPA has really done a lot of pretty amazing kind of mission-oriented science and technology and engineering development. It was involved in the development of GPS and, in fact, in the launch of the first satellites. It embarked on the mission to create an invisible airplane, which led ultimately to stealth technology. There's been a very long history of work in robotics and things related to robotics that now are being used for some pretty amazing advanced prosthetics work. And of course, something that all of us who are computer scientists in the room are very familiar with is the ARPANET, which just over 40 years ago was born. And I'll say much more about 40 years ago, since that was a big year for science and technology in the US. But all of these things and many, many more have been kind of integral parts of the science and technology landscape in our country and, in fact, the world, and all had some origins out of DARPA. So now I'm at DARPA, not where I expected to be right now. I was holding what I thought was the best academic job in the US. It was not something I thought about leaving anytime soon, even just for a temporary period. And so how did I end up there? Well, after the election, there was a transition team. Berkeley's Tom Khalil was asked to chair a science and technology committee. Tom talked to Ed Lazowska. Ed mobilized a whole bunch of people to write 2-page position papers on S&T issues of national importance. And one of the 2-page position papers that came to me as an assignment, my Christmas vacation homework assignment from Ed Lazowska, was to write a piece on re-envisioning DARPA. And so I did that. I wrote a couple of drafts. After some discussions with Ed and others, decided that it might have more impact if someone else, not from Carnegie Mellon, would join. Maybe someone else as a co-author who had bona fide DARPA experience, and so I asked Randy Katz to join. He gladly agreed and made significant revisions and improvements to the text. Now, at this point, I really wish I'd put his name first in the authorship list. Things might have turned out differently. But in fact, this document ended up being one of the pieces that kept getting thrown back at me as people were trying to talk me into coming to DARPA. Not just fellow academics and my colleagues, but people in the government. As things took shape, I thought more and more seriously about this. The kicker, however, was the appointment of Regina Dugan as the new DARPA director. And Regina is, of course, the first woman director of the agency, but she's also a friend of mine and someone who I've had several interactions with over the past 12 or 13 years. And I sincerely hope you all have a chance to meet her sometime. She really is a very, very interesting person, very dynamic, and has a lot of great vision. And the combination of all these factors, plus Regina Dugan being appointed the agency director, really made it impossible for me to say no, so I'm there. Now, Regina is a very sharp planner and thinker, has very clear vision about what she wants to accomplish. And so in the discussions that I had with her, she had very specific missions, very specific tasks for me to accomplish. There were numerous, but the main three are listed here. One is to focus on strategic surprise. And I'll explain more about what's meant by that. But roughly speaking, is to really regain an emphasis at DARPA, at least in one office, if not agency-wide, on trying to understand and anticipate the problems that we don't know about yet. It's one thing to look at what our warfighters are struggling with today, identify technical problems and go after them, but it's a somewhat different and important task to try to place ourselves in a position to better anticipate the problems that could arise tomorrow or next year or 10 years from now. And so maybe the most important thing I've been asked to do is to try to do that. A pretty tall order. In fact, when I arrived at DARPA, sitting in an office, I'm all alone. The office is just me. I have really no idea at that moment how one tries to anticipate strategic surprise. And so I'll tell you where I've gone with that. Second is to establish a new office. And the director had referred to this as a megatrends office. I'll explain to you more about what that is. And then finally, to help strategize about how to re-engage with the best and brightest researchers in the country, including and in particular academic researchers. And so these were the three missions. So what I'd like to do is just go through these three one by one and explain what I've been up to. All right, now before I dive in, a couple of things. One is it's still very early days. And toward the end of the talk, I'll give you an idea of where we stand right now. But it's only been 6 months for the new director, 5 months, a little bit less for me being at DARPA, and only about 4 months for this new office. And so things aren't, it's still a work in progress. And maybe another way of saying it is that we're still highly impressionable. We're just really looking for great ideas and directions to go and places to stay away from. Secondly, the slides I'm about to show you, if you know my research, it's more in theoretical aspects of programming languages and program analysis. Many of you know my papers tend to have a lot of Greek in them. The slides, and that's my comfort zone, the slides I'm going to show you aren't like that. There are lots of pictures. It's almost like a slideshow. Don't think less of me for that. But it's the state of the thinking right now, and some of these slides are slides that I've used with DoD leadership, with the 4 stars in the services, with the Secretary of Defense, where we're really talking at a very strategic level. And so I wanted to expose some of that presentation style to you as well. Okay? So let's go. So let's start, first of all, on this idea of strategic surprise. So think about it. A DARPA office is very much like a department in a university, roughly speaking. It maybe has a lot more money, but it gives it away to other people instead of spending it on itself. And so it's very much a good department. And so you're supposed to create the Department of Strategic Surprise. You know, how on earth are you going to do that? And what does that even mean? Well, Regina Dugan herself has a number of ways of talking about this. And let me just borrow one slide from her, and it's actually a test. And so I'll refer to this as the director's test. So I'm going to show you a picture of a bunch of colored dots. And if you've been tested by this before, don't ruin it for everyone else. But what I want you to do, and I'll give you 5 seconds, I want you to count the number of red dots. Okay, everyone ready? Okay, here we go. 5 seconds. Okay, so how many blue dots were there? Okay, so what's the point of this? Why does the director show this? Well, we have wars going on, conflicts, and the military really has to focus on its mission. And if its mission is to count the red dots, it has to be absolutely single-minded and make sure it accomplishes that goal. An agency like DARPA, though, with its mandate to prevent and create surprise, has a different mission. It is the part of the Defense Department that has to count the blue dots, count the purple dots, count the yellow dots, see if they're triangles, and really try to look at things and slice and dice them in all different ways in order to prevent the possibility that we might be caught out, just in case we need to know these other things. And so there is always a sense at which DARPA is trying to take people out of their boxes, take people out of their comfort zones, and challenge conventional thinking. Now, that's easy enough to say, but how do you do that? And so as I've built up a team in the new office and just meditated on this question, I've arrived at a few different approaches, and maybe you have your own that you could suggest to me later, but let me run through some of the approaches that I've taken. So the first thing to do is let's go back to 1969 and the first landing on the moon. This is a picture of Neil Armstrong on the moon. Truly a monumental technical accomplishment. Thousands of technical innovations, and just as amazing was the marshaling of over 65,000 people, all collaborating on the same goal of putting this man on the moon. Really a monumental achievement. In that same year, the ARPANET was born. And in fact, by the end of that year, there were 4 nodes in the ARPANET, and Doug Engelbart conducted the mother of all demos, where he had this amazing way of thinking about a network, not just as a piece of technology, but as a tool for, as is quoted here, augmenting human intellect. And so this idea of taking these fuzzy kind of intelligence and social science notions and demonstrating, building a mouse and demonstrating the idea that people in geographically disparate locations around the world could collaborate on problem solving and document preparation was also an amazing accomplishment. And this slide, by the way, I obtained from Pat Lincoln at SRI, and so it has an SRI feel to it, but it's still a monumental science technology achievement nonetheless, even if you're not from SRI. So a question we can ask is, these 2 amazing things that happened in 1969, both also have an ARPA imprint. ARPA was born as the start of the space race, and in fact, ARPA Order Number 1 contributed to technologies in the Saturn V booster. And then the ARPA-funded effort around the ARPANET and Engelbart's demo. Just amazing, amazing achievements all in the same year. And if we ask the question, which had more impact, maybe it's a silly question because they're not really comparable and they're both really amazing. In fact, I'm fond of saying that I wouldn't be a scientist today if it weren't for watching the moon landing as a small child. Well, one way to answer this question, the way that I believe, is that, in fact, there is no comparison. My son hasn't used Saturn V booster technology to reinforce his school lessons. He hasn't used lunar landing technology to entertain himself. And of course, people haven't downloaded porn using docking technologies either. The point here is that the incredible reach of technologies, when they have the opportunity to become truly democratized and reach virtually everyone on the globe, that idea of democratization can lead to surprisingly disruptive results. Huge disruptions, and you see them every day. Some of them, of course, get bandied about in the news all the time because, in fact, they're even threatening the whole news industry. And so how do we account for these things? And as we've embarked on trying to create a new program office at DARPA that's really trying to anticipate surprises like this, one place we've looked is to look at technological and social trends that are showing the kinds of exponential growth and trend toward democratization that could be disruptive. Now, just before I actually started officially at DARPA, the Secretary of Defense, Secretary Gates, visited DARPA. And so Regina Dugan asked me to spend a few minutes with him. And I had no idea what to talk to him about. I mean, I hadn't even started there. And I decided I wanted to tell him a story about democratization. Now, I was making drives back and forth to Washington from Pittsburgh, where I live, in order to meet with people at DARPA. And unfortunately, I was getting speeding tickets. And it was a real problem because as I was imagining not moving my wife and son from Pittsburgh and doing this commute, it would be big trouble if I lost my license. And so this is what saved me. Now, I should explain, I have a very, very good radar detector, laser radar detector, but I was still getting tickets. But this thing has solved my problems. And those of you who aren't familiar with this is an iPhone application called Trapster. And what Trapster does, as you can see here, as you're driving along, it uses the GPS and internet capabilities on the iPhone to give me a verbal warning whenever I'm approaching a recently spotted speed camera or speed trap. Okay? And if I see one, I can report that just by touching this button. And in fact, when I see a speed trap that's been reported by someone else, I get a dig-like thumbs up and thumbs down so I can rate the quality of that report. And that raises people's social standing in the social network, and so there's social media involved. You can dynamically form convoys, all sorts of wonderful tools here. Okay. And in fact, as of last October, there were 50,000 downloads a day of this tool. And of course, the more and more people that download this, the better it gets, and the fewer false reports there are, because the whole thing kind of reinforces itself using social media. This is another example of technology democratization at work. The convergence of ubiquitous access to GPS, to cloud computing resources for mapping and for social media, for mobile internet, all converge here to create something completely disruptive and something that changes the game. The standard game that I, as a motorist, and the Maryland State Police were playing, okay, where there's measure, countermeasure. They have a radar detector, they have a radar, I get a radar detector. They get a laser, I get a laser detector, and we keep going back and forth. The game is now changed. And so when we talk about game changers, technology democratization is one way to anticipate the possibility of game-changing technologies, both for our own opportunities and capabilities, but also as threats from asymmetric adversaries. Of course, sometimes it takes a little bit of a leap of imagination to see the military relevance of that. Here's one that's a little easier to see. And this is a Google mashup that was started by a graduate student at George Mason University who went on a guided tour of North Korea, actually went on a couple just out of interest, and created a mashup to just record the things that he had seen. That attracted the interest of some former military, from people who had relatives in Korea, other people that the Wall Street Journal called busybodies who had just spent a lot of time reading newspaper reports, connecting the dots, looking at pixels, to the point now where a very large part of the critical infrastructure of North Korea has been mapped out, including about 200 anti-aircraft battery locations, the secret location of Camp 16, mass burial sites from the last famine, and so on. Pretty amazing, and all instigated by a graduate student with no ability to hire thousands of analysts and launch billion-dollar satellites. And so, again, we see this idea of democratization at work and the ability for anyone to achieve a situational understanding that rivals what very large nations are able to do. So it's, again, an example of democratization in action. And in fact, all of these examples also, in fact, a factor in democratization are technologies with, that exhibit exponential trends. And so as our team has tried to sift through all of the possibilities, one thing we've always tried to do is to see if there are clear trend lines where we see exponential growth or decrease curves, colliding exponentials that point to the possibility that things like this might happen. Here's another example. Of course, you're all familiar with the internet, and there's exponential curves galore. But in biology, we see some of the same things. We're seeing an exponential decrease in the cost of gene assembly and an exponential increase in our ability to do gene assembly, typically with some type of predictable outcome. And so when you see those exponentials starting to intersect, that starts to attract more and more curious people. And that community shows every sign of being able to grow exponentially if only provided a little bit of incentive, maybe funding incentive. So if we look at the annual iGEM Jamboree, we see every year significant growth in the number of people that are attending, and it's really growing very rapidly. And in the last iGEM Jamboree from last Halloween, I was really struck with some of the creativity of the student-led projects in particular that came out of this. And so what are the possibilities if we are able to track this exponential trend, say, for another 5 to 8 years? If you do the calculations on numbers of base pairs, for example, you get to some pretty interesting numbers. And the possible threats and also opportunities for us could be very, very surprising. And so this is another area where we try to do some analysis and figure out where to go. Now, on a completely different tack, another major concept that looms large here is what the business people call open innovation. And what's meant by open innovation? There's actually a taxonomy of this, which I'll show later. But one area of open innovation basically pertains to reaching out to communities beyond, let's say, the DARPA contractors or beyond the university community, even looking at mass participation by the general public. Last week, I know Dan Kaufman was here, and he was intimately involved with a program with Zoran Popovic here on Foldit. And Foldit is one example of open innovation. When you have open competitions, you really invite and create an incentive structure based on competitive pressure that enables you to achieve surprising results, even disruptive results, in the ability to understand the structure of proteins. Also, to find people out in the world who are unusually good, even without any formal training, at understanding the folding structure of proteins. Of course, DARPA itself has been experimenting with this. In our office, the deputy director, Norm Whitaker, was the program manager for the DARPA Urban Challenge. And while the top academic and industrial teams really did the best, the range of competitors from garage mechanics and student-led groups was pretty amazing. Especially amazing when you consider the high barrier to entry and the high cost of entry for a robot race like this. Our office, last December, on December 5th, we staged our first open competition, first of, we hope, several competitions. This one in the social networking space called the DARPA Network Challenge. And this was in commemoration of the 40th anniversary of the ARPANET. And what we did is we hid 8-foot weather balloons. They were tethered to the ground, hoisted 100 feet in the air, in public but undisclosed locations in the United States. And we said anyone who can report the latitude and longitude of these balloons first would win $40,000 in commemoration of the 40 years. To our surprise, almost 4,400 teams registered for this competition, including about 250 teams from outside the US, including Russia, India, Brazil, Iran, the Sudan, China, really all over the world. I was at the balloon in San Francisco, and that was the first balloon location to be reported by a team of psychics, of all people. And so it was pretty amazing. That's the only balloon they found. But it was really quite an amazing thing. And if you watched the news, the team from MIT used a fairly innovative recursive incentive structure, and they were able to mobilize within 48 hours a very large army of people, both to look for balloons and also to verify unverified balloon sightings. And so they were quite impressive. But there were also teams of existing social networks like the Nerd Fighters and the Geocachers and the Lance Armstrong Foundation and so on that did very well as tech companies like Google. All were really credible competitors. And so in this situation, we wanted to explore the viral diffusion of information in social networks and the mobilization of social networks in short time, but to do so in a military context. And by that I mean in a context that's highly adversarial. And so while we are beginning to understand a lot about cascades and viral diffusion of information, typically that's not done in situations where there are people who have strong incentives to keep secrets and to lie, cheat, and steal. And in fact, there were hundreds of false reports spread intentionally as well as unintentionally, decoy balloons hoisted, beautifully photoshopped images, and even some attempted cyber attacks to cause people's DNS to go to spoof balloon reporting websites in other countries. And so it was really a very interesting experiment. And I'm hoping that we'll see some good academic papers coming out of this in the next few months. Now, I mentioned about a taxonomy of open innovation. And one way that business school people talk about open innovation is to look at a taxonomy where you have kind of a solution space going from kind of centralized to network-centric or diffused solutions, and a problem space from highly structured problems to kind of emergent problems. And if you think about open competitions, they're sort of up in that quadrant, where basically, where we want to say what we want is some type of absolute kind of, there are no beauty contests here. We have an absolute set metric for who wins and who loses. But how you approach the problem, the methods that you use is really up to you. And it's completely open. And that's in contrast to something like the iTunes App Store, where you really have structure in both cases, where you have a set platform and a set way of putting things together. And here, our office, jointly with the Tactical Technologies Office, put out a request for input on an idea. There's, you can't see this fuzzy picture. There are 3 little volleyballs. They're actually satellites. They're miniature space satellites. These are prototypes, so they're not let out of the International Space Station, so they're only allowed in the space station. But we want to develop an interface that would allow many people, maybe high school students, grade school students, to be able to access and program these things to do things. So, how could we tap into innovative ideas from the crowd that way. And so we're interested in your input there. And so again, it's really setting up that platform. When you have mashups, you really, again, have a set platform, but you're really, what that platform is used for is really up to the crowds. North Korea Uncovered is like that. One thing that you'll see very soon is we will have robotics programs, and we'll have robotics programs where we will contract with academic and industrial researchers, but look for the same robot hardware to be available in public spaces like museums, where people in the general public or in the larger artist technology community can access and present code in social settings in order to gain their innovations. And then that upper right corner, I don't really know what to do with at all. There are very interesting things in the intersection, for example, of bio and medicine and computing, such as the Tropical Disease Initiative. It's a model for something that's really completely emergent and open, and what we should be doing here is unclear. The point here is that all of these quadrants, we see surprises, technological and strategic surprises coming out over and over and over again. And so in our office, we're very interested in exploring all 4 quadrants of this open innovation space. And then, so we talked about technology democratization and open innovation. Third dimension in the search for surprise is in pushing boundaries. And roughly speaking, these are areas where people in polite societies like ours tend to avoid thinking about. Now, some of these things pertain to issues having to do with safety or ethical issues or privacy. And we can't assume that future adversaries would have similar blank spots in their thinking. And so in our office, we try to force ourselves to feel uncomfortable and push various boundaries. Now, I've put this idea in pretty stark terms, but actually, boundary pushing or making people feel uncomfortable can happen in much simpler ways as well. For example, let's just take the very mundane idea of acquisition, defense acquisitions, the task of actually getting new technology and new equipment into the military. It's a long, arduous process. This picture shows the tactical quiet power generator. So it's a fuel cell-based piece of technology. It's really impressive, generates a lot of electricity very, very quietly. And so it can be used to power a forward base and not reveal, not have a big heat signature, not have a big noise signature. This picture I thought was really, really cool because this soldier, I don't know if you can see what he's doing. Can anyone see what he's doing? He's charging his iPod. Now, what's going on here? Well, it turns out that soldiers, especially in their second deployments, are spending a lot of money, close to $1,000 of their own money to equip themselves as they go out. And that's a sign of kind of latent innovation, where we have soldiers who really, based on their own experience, are innovating in the kinds of equipment that they think they need. And they're circumventing the acquisition process to do this. And so we can ask the question, well, are there IT-enabled, computing-enabled acquisition models that might allow more dynamic equipping of our warfighters? What if we supplied soldiers with modern handsets? That itself might have to go through a standard acquisition process. But what about the applications? Would we go through the standard military acquisition process of writing a requirement specification for every app that we think we might want, having requests for proposals and giving a contract? Or would we create a online social space where developers and warfighters were able to express their concerns and their needs and then create a competitive market where people are motivated by the numbers of downloads as opposed to a requirements document. And so while this isn't computer science research, it's just fundamentally computing enabled. to be able to kind of create that online space that directly connects developers with the end users. And so can we do that? And this is an example that really pushes the boundaries, really ends up worrying and scaring some people. It just takes people way out of their comfort zones. Another example is depicted here. This is a picture of some of the protests in the wake of the Iranian election last June. And as many of you know, at the height of those protests, Twitter was used extensively, and at one point hitting about 220,000 tweets per hour. And this really reverberated around the world, and then suddenly one day it all stopped. Now, exactly why, we don't know, but one could surmise, just imagining how we would try to stop that traffic, one could imagine that various technologies that maybe were developed for defensive purposes were employed to suppress free expression and the cause of freedom and democracy. And so we can ask the question, should we try to develop technologies that go directly against the trend towards removing anonymity on the internet? And again, these are questions and potential investments in projects that would directly contradict ongoing investments by the Defense Department. And in that way, we're pushing boundaries and hoping to uncover surprises. And so these are examples of this third category. Now, all of this technology democratization, pushing boundaries, and open innovation, to my mind, are all made possible through computer science. And maybe I'm a bigot because I'm a computer scientist, but I just see the world and see the future of this all being driven by computing. And in fact, it drives more and more of a need for computing. And so another element of all of this is to really understand and track what's coming next in computing technology and try to get there first. Now, there are lots of things happening here. And what are the drivers for more and more computing technology and power? Well, I spent some time talking about social media and social networks. And doing the social media network analysis has driven a lot of very interesting research. Some research that came out of some PhD work by Yuri Leskovec at CMU and who is now at Stanford pertains to developing compact mathematical models that have some predictive power in the characteristics of real-world social networks. And similarly, there are some emerging algorithms that are still quite challenging in terms of the amount of computing power that they need, but are able to uncover really very, very interesting characteristics of very large dynamic graph structures in social networks. And getting enough computing power to do these things contributes directly to our abilities to communicate strategically and to mobilize quickly on networks. The office that we're creating here, because of this, has inherited a large number of the core computing programs at DARPA, including the high-performance computing programs. And so the High Productivity Computing Systems program, HPCS, is in our office. And under construction right now is the Blue Waters machine, which has IBM technology that's based directly on the technology out of this program. Here it's under construction. These are just power units. The missing computer is in here. It's under construction. There's a new building there in the NCSA for this. But beyond that, going beyond what we currently see as approaching the end of the roadmap for big supercomputers, we see all sorts of growth curves that are hitting walls in the near future. And so the question is, how can we get beyond this? And in fact, from my point of view, I want to get to the end of these CMOS and Moore's Law roadmaps first, and then I want to know what lies beyond. And as we look at the computing needs for the Defense Department, one thing we realize is that we want and need the greater computing power, but at much, much reduced power requirements. In fact, by some calculations, we need a reduction of 1,000-fold in the energy requirements for airborne computing systems. So we want to retain current or greater computing power, but at 1,000-fold less energy. And when you start to do that, then you get into significant questions about the operating systems, the programming languages and programming methodologies, and in fact, the whole software stack on these future systems. And so this isn't multi-core. This is really trying to look well beyond multi-core, still in the CMOS regime, but reimagine if we wanted to achieve these energy targets, how would we do it? And every thought process that we've conducted on this brings you down the same road of really completely rethinking the processor architecture, the system architecture, and the whole software stack. So, look very soon for new programs along these lines. So this was kind of the issue of strategic surprise, where we've been looking for markers that include technology democratization, exponential trends, pushing boundaries, open innovation, and all in the foundation of future computing systems. And to do all of that, I was asked to start a new office. And so what is this new office? If you think about this, Tom Khalil in the Science and Technology Policy Office referred to this office as just as much about new attitudes as new technologies. And in fact, you see that in talking about pushing boundaries and thinking about democratization. And in fact, when Regina Dugan came to the agency, she created 2 new offices. So at the start, there were these 5 offices, 3 offices which I refer to as technology offices. Defense Sciences is really the home for basic research in mathematics, physics, materials, chemistry. Information Processing Techniques Office, you met Dan Kaufman, many of you, last week. And he's interested in the so-called information tsunami. So the military takes in very large amounts of information or data from many, many different sources, and somehow has to manage and make sense of all of that. And so IPTO is tasked with developing technologies to do that. And the Microsystems Technology Office, roughly speaking, is a device technologies office, making better and better transistors, finding the right junction for the function is MTO. And then there are 2 systems offices that build prototypes and deployable systems in strategic technologies primarily for sensor platforms. So things that orbit the Earth, fly, swim, roll around on the ground, as well as a considerable amount of cybersecurity work that pertains to the contemporary threat, the threat that's really imminent. And then the Tactical Technologies Office does much of the same thing as Strategic Technologies, except they're things that fly and swim and roll on the ground, tend to blow up when they hit things. And so there's a kind of a set of offices like this. Regina Dugan wanted to create 2 new offices when she came in. One is, and I think of these as bookends. One is the Adaptive Execution Office. And you can think of this as a kind of skunkworks office. It's really looking at tech transfer and trying to really dramatically improve the quality of the technologies that are transferred out of DARPA when there are opportunities to do so. And then the office that I was asked to create, which has been given this very long name by the director called Transformational Convergence Technology. And it's supposed to do all of the things that I described before. Somehow engage in open innovation, anticipate strategic surprise, develop next generation computing systems. And so this is what I've been asked to do. Now, when I try to talk to people about what we're interested in, there are different ways of slicing this. And let me say, to start with, that let me emphasize again that we've been in existence for 4 months. And so what's represented here are mostly Peter Lee's personal thoughts on the matter. In DARPA today, with the new director, program managers really have have a great deal of power. They're really empowered to develop and strike out in new directions and develop their own strategies. And so the program managers that join will have a big say in what actually happens. But the thought processes that I've outlined before have kind of led me, at least at this stage, after 4 months, to this dissection of the office's technical thrusts. And if you had to summarize the whole thing, it's really about developing opportunities to create exponentials, new exponential trends that work in our favor, or exponential trends that we can demonstrate are emerging threats. So either one of those things. And roughly speaking, I divide these into areas having to do with computing, core computing, communities, including social communities and harnessing the abilities of large numbers of people, and convergence, basically bringing or IT enabling abilities into new domains. And so what I've done here is I've tried to put labels on these things in the blue, where we go from next generation computing to network systems resilience, to complex network science, human-machine systems, all the way to radical manufacturing. And then finally on the right are some of the strategic thrust areas that we've been really thinking about a lot and trying to develop candidate program concepts around. And so this is, gives you kind of a snapshot of where we're at right now. And so from that foundation of computing, we're really trying to achieve quite a bit, looking for and anticipating surprise in these areas. Now, I wanted to say just one word about programs. You can already see from the DARPA Network Challenge, the balloon hunt, that programs in our office can take all different shapes and sizes. But there's a certain type of program that I'm very interested in trying to develop, since it pertains to development of whole research communities. And so if we think of a research program in our office as a big triangle, the top of this triangle is some big capability that we're trying to achieve. So think of VLSI or MEMS, something along those lines. And that capability, I have to be able to sell to the DoD leadership, and so it has some connection to of DoD relevance, of military relevance. So if we're talking about VLSI, it's a connection to putting far more intelligence and precision in all sorts of platforms and devices of military importance. And then supporting this program are a number of independently contracted projects that, in the case of VLSI, might range from basic logic to languages for network layouts and circuit description, to lithography, to integrators and foundries and so on. And so all of this adds up to programs that, first of all, are based on some capability that the whole research community that we're trying to build here is focused on, provide enough funding, sustained funding, to have a shot at realizing that capability, and then contracts with a community of fully devoted researchers. And so, as I've been visiting universities, my main interest as an office director is to try to arrive at candidate possibilities for what's in that yellow starburst. What is it that we could be developing very healthy and vibrant communities around? And this is one of my main goals. And in fact, today, a number of ideas have come up. And in fact, at every place I visit, there have been a number of ideas. And as we sift through these things, we hope to bring program managers on board that can develop those into full programs and really get going. So where are we at? It's been more than 100 days, but 100 is a nice round number. I have 6 program managers right now. They're great. When I arrived last August, I was planning for 8 for this fiscal year. I think we'll be at more like 10, but we won't have too many. I would like 1 or 2 more people like me in the office. And so So please come talk to me afterwards. It's a really fun environment right now. It's like a startup. We have 27 people total. So if you count all the staff and so on, it's really a small operation, and it's pretty exciting. We have really a lot of work to do, and there are huge opportunities. Of course, the director is still fairly new and doing more internal reorganization, but I think that's settling down. And for our office, we've just gotten to the stage now, after 4 months, where we're poised to spend money. And I've signed my first few ARPA orders just a week and a half ago. And so we're just now starting to spend money, and I'm hoping that by this time next year, it'll be that we'll be very, very busy in funding lots of great research. So that's this Megatrends office. Achieve all the above, engage in interdisciplinary research, establish vibrant communities. Now, lastly, I was asked to help strategize with a small group and with the director in re-engaging with academic research. And one part of that was to arrange for a year-long tour of universities. And we did that. We started off on the West Coast, visited a few universities, and then that got written up in the New York Times, and then something like 75 invitations to visit universities rolled in. And that created a problem because the director didn't want to play favorites, and there's no way to visit 75 places in a year. So that tour is not really going to happen. There'll be some other type of set of regional meetings. For my part, of course, I have specific interests, and so I'm trying to visit all the relevant places, and that's one of the reasons that I'm here. But I think engaging with academia is the first step. The second step is to eliminate the self-inflicted wounds that have made it hard for universities and small businesses to work with DARPA over the last few years. And so here we've made quite a bit of progress. First of all, a huge amount of power and authority has been given back to program managers. And in particular, program managers are in charge of structuring their programs and contracts and of structuring or developing their assessment mechanisms for progress. And in particular, at least in my office, I would expect good program managers not to use 12-month go, no-go contracts. Although it's up to them, they're free to do so. But it seems true that that doesn't work well for university researchers. Second is that contracts and subcontracts to universities will be marked as fundamental research. And the immediate impact of that is that the ITAR restrictions and pre-publication review requirements will be lifted for those research activities. And so that will make it much easier. Many, many things will be made much easier for university research and for small businesses by doing that. And then a number of other changes that all have the same kind of flavor of just eliminating senseless kind of aspects of that have just made it hard or created friction in working with DARPA. And so I think all of that is really great. And so now all we need are the great ideas to develop great programs and get lots of people working on good things. And so what I need is all of you to be excited about working with DARPA. I think that looking ahead over the next 2 years, there's just huge opportunities. One thing that we need, remember, it's very early, so we have a deficit of ideas. Things are really in this formative stage, so we need ideas. You can communicate with me or with program managers. One very good way to communicate is by providing us with white papers. Talk to us. White papers, if you send them to us, someone will read them. We'll try to mark them up and engage with you if there's anything at all that's interesting to us. And they don't have to be long, just a couple of pages. And look for the first couple of BAAs coming out of our office over the next month. And so we've had our first 2 program approvals, and the BAAs will be emerging very shortly. And that'll be a watershed moment for our new office. This last bullet, think boldly and embrace risk. One thing that has become apparent to me as I've understood more, again, about DARPA's problems and DoD problems in various areas, such as computing architectures, networking, computer security, AI, robotics, there has been some divergence of the kinds of problems and thinking that academics have been engaged in with military problems. For example, in networking areas, it is important for the military to think about networking problems in environments and in parts of the world where there are intentional adversaries who are trying to deny connectivity and access. And so it's a little bit different than the nice Web 2.0 world we live in stateside. And so as we engage in dialogue back and forth, I'm hoping that the thinking will become aligned and that will create lots of opportunities. So let me finish here before I take some questions and say, join me. It's really a historic opportunity right now. Right now, we have a new director who is just pushing ahead with just amazing force and vision. I am in a honeymoon period with this director and really trying to help her realize her vision for the agency. And so right now, there are just huge, huge opportunities. And the impact that could be created could really last for a very long time. Program managers have to be really good in this new DARPA. And they really have to think big. But I'm being very careful to really limit the number of program managers in their office in order to maximize the amount of money that each program manager could have access to. And so if you think big, you'll have a very good chance to get very large resources and do a lot. And so I'm being very selective. And so really have turned down some very, very good people already. And hoping to get a few, maybe two more very, very good people. Two people just like the people in this room. And if you do it, you'll be a hero, and I think it'll be fun. So with that, thank you very much for your attention. Really appreciated it, and I'm happy to take questions.